Welcome back, everyone. My intent had been to go into AutoCAD here to show you how you can set up some AutoCAD drawings to bring them into SketchUp, but AutoCAD does not seem to be cooperating in my machine, so we'll just talk around that fact. And the reason why we're talking around that fact is that many of you have AutoCAD training in 2D, and that is great and perfectly transferable over to SketchUp or over to Inventor by making sure that you make things in blocks. So you're better off making your blocks within AutoCAD, either a lot of blocks within one drawing or separate drawings by doing a W block or a block command and then a W block command. Remembering that the most important thing in most design that is part based is what is your insertion point and what is your Z axis, basically, which in a 2D world generally comes straight out from your insertion point. That said, in SketchUp, no matter how you start any program, you want to right away get in and check that your units are set. So I'm going to set my units here to decimal feet, and you're going to have to then be aware if things come in, how that might work for us. You also want to be very aware and looking here that layers make a big deal in this, that you're going to want to have different layers, and it will bring in all your AutoCAD layers. And then also you'll see later the concept of styles is going to be the analogy to layer manager, but it's a lot richer. And then the other thing that is going to be incredibly important are then these concept of scenes. Scenes used to be called pages, but they're laid out here adding a scene. So that collection of scenes, which is going to include the layer management stuff, layers, and then bringing in, when you bring in blocks, they're going to be called something called components. Now, there is an incredibly great large number of components available out on the 3D warehouse, which is right here. So I'll show you how to bring in one of those. So I'm going to go right here to 3D warehouse, and I'm going to put in 2D, two-dimensional schematic, and see what I find. So there's all kinds of 2D schematic trees. Let's see what we've got here, and they're going to see how some will probably be coming up. And this has to do with very often when you're dealing in work, you're doing with 2D work. You're doing kind of layouts. Now, however, we'll do a family of trees in a little bit. This is these are the only ones who've used the word schematic in it. So let me try this. 2D schematic, electrical. See if there's anything electrical out there. How about electrical? So this concept is searching. Electric piano. Now we're seeing a lot of electric parts. Let's do it with electric parts collection. So we're going to bring in this electric parts. We're going to download the model, and you see that this is going to be for sure 3D as we come in. It breaks them in. And now when we're going to have a chance to be able to look at that, we're going to look around and we'll see what's inside. So if you look here, these all came in as one component, this is called. And so I'm clicking on it. I can click on it, and I can go right click, entity info, and it shows me the name of it is electrical parts. Now, however, if we also look in the window components and look at what is in the model, you'll see that it came in, there's actually two parts that came in, a dimmer switch and then a larger parts collection. Now, you can always take a part collection and right click and hit explode, just like an AutoCAD, and then we'll see what it did to that components list. I don't think it would have, right? Oh, it actually does take them, breaks them up. So interesting that you don't see the individual components until you explode. So you probably want to go about doing that when you bring things in. We're going to see whether the same in AutoCAD. I can take that one, and I can now say right click, explode, and we'll see what happens now. And you think that took it down to its base unit. So you've got this ability to kind of bring in collections, and when you bring them in and explode them, they explode down to the next lower parts. So for instance, now we can go ahead and switch with the neon light. So when you see that comes in, it's bringing in that just like the design center in AutoCAD. So working with blocks that way. You're going to see later that there's a lot more smartness to the blocks. Well, let me rephrase that. AutoCAD's got a lot of smartness to blocks as well, but the components as well has a lot of smartness that generally is put in before you stick these things out. So that's how you bring in an external. You can also bring in any drawing that way. You can file, import. You can import, and this is what we're going to be talking about mostly for the next 10 minutes. You can import a great number of things, starting with, and you see in this case I don't have the AutoCAD, but you can bring in other SketchUp files. You can bring in 3ds files, KMZ files from Google Earth and the like. That's a big part of it. These we're going to talk about in a little bit, the JPEG and PNG. I believe there's PDF. And generally you have to be aware is the older the SketchUp you have, the better off you are in terms of import. In other words, to import AutoCAD files, I do not have that option in this because I'm not in the Pro version that would appear on this computer. So let's talk about images. But realize this is where you would bring in your AutoCAD files, and all the blocks that were part of a drawing would become part of that. All right, so bringing in images, which is really one of the things if you're going to be doing basic animation or basic collaging or mashing up or working with this program, you're going to want to be bringing in images, and you can bring them in either as an image or as a texture. An image acts like its own unit, and a texture attaches and kind of paints an object. I would suggest for now that probably is, for the most part, you might want to experiment with both, but using as a texture might be better for just base presentation. So you'll see how that goes, and we'll see how that works a little bit here. So I'm going to hit cancel here, and I'm going to go, once again, remember about layers. I'm going to go now to window, layers, and I can make, you see the electrical only had one layer electrical. He didn't have that broken up into layers, but I can add maybe image collection, and I can make that current by clicking on it. So now when I go about and say file, import, and I go out and look for wherever I want to go, I don't have many of them out there, Mark Patak Pictures. I have an icon that I made, so I can bring that. I'm going to use that as an image. That's a tiny little icon that I made for a toolbar. You see how it's kind of washed out when it comes in, so that's a picture. And I can bring in another one. It looks kind of cool. That was just done in Paint, actually. That's an icon for an AutoCAD object. Now I can do that same thing with that image. That came out in as an image. And remember, in this program, you select, you grab your tool, you grab the face and hold the shift key, and then you go to what you want to grab, select. And I'm going to turn that up 90 degrees. So I've got something there. Remember, in this program as well, you can then take an array of images. I'm going to do that just so you can see the difference. I can take that, select, tell me my tool, which is move or copy, hit a control key for copy, or it's the alt key on an Apple. I'm going to grab that, and then I can say something like 5 times, and I have what starts to look like a tiling, because that's what it is. I can take this again, and if you notice, it grabbed something on the other piece I didn't want, so I'm hitting escape or space bar. I'm going to grab, don't want to do that, I'm going to grab, I'm going to hold the shift key and finish out my selection. I select my tool, or learn the key in, I hold the control for copy, I go here, click up to there, and I say 5 times. So you see in that I have this kind of really good ability very quickly to get something kind of that's a tiling concept. Well, there's an easier way to do that with the same image, and I'm going to do that now. This program does a lot of wanting to find a face, but it's not a bad thing if you're an AutoCAD drafter to learn draft a line. I'm hitting the space bar here to end. View, very quickly you might want to turn off the axes. Draft a line, and then learn to select, copy, hit the control key, and let it try to find your axes. So I'm going to try to, it'll intuit there. Intuition's a big part of the program, and then draw a line from the endpoint to the endpoint, and from the end, and from the endpoint to the endpoint. Again, for the most part, you're going to be doing most things in AutoCAD and bringing them in. I would not try to be very productive in SketchUp at this point. You see, this program would generally work this way, however. You would just draw, and it would draw the face. So it will tend to find a certain face, and you can kind of give it some hints as to whether it wants a vertical face or a flat face or where it wants to be. That said, we can now, instead of importing as a image, we can import as a texture. So we can do, once again, File, Import, and we can again pick that same texture, and this time we're going to say Use as Texture. Hit Open, and now we've got a texture that it's going to want to put there. I'm going to go ahead and grab it, and you notice it did the same thing. So the difference is this actually is now painted as part of that texture, and you can go into later, and these are separate pieces. So as I go here and erase, I can cut out pieces of this. Where in this case, erasing would be a little bit more difficult. I'm going to go ahead and just pull this out here. You see how it's trying to find that face. Now when I go ahead and right click, erase, and kind of tiles around it. So they very similar, look the same, but basically images come in either as a image, individual piece, or as a what's called a texture in most of these programs. And AutoCAD has the same kind of concept. Now there was one more, we're not going to do it here, but you can, one of the more powerful things you can do in this program is to import as a matched photo. And we really don't have anything that makes sense on as a matched photo, but the interface starts to look something like that. So you don't want to do that for now. I'm going to hit OK here, escape out, right click, better do an edit undo, edit undo, and now somehow I'm not going to be able to get rid of that thing. So as I look around, it looks like it is gone. All right, so a couple more minutes here. So how do we go about using those things? Usually we use those things by then also setting up a camera. So you left click on where you want your camera to be, and you then pull where you want the target to be. So you left click here, and I pull to there, and then it gives you the option of changing your eye height. I'm going to make my eye height 5 feet, and then you can kind of move around here, and then at this point you do View, Animation, Add a Scene, which is what you saw in the other video. Now you can then learn to move around as you might otherwise. I'm going to shift my camera. That's not moving anything but the camera. I can go ahead and twist this around a little bit, and then I can do again View, Animation, Add Scene. I can do the same thing. What you're doing is you're changing where the camera and the target is, and I'm going to go ahead and say View, Animation, Add Scene. I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going to look around the pack, and you start to see how those things are colored. View, Animation, Add Scene. And in the end, you can then, I'll do one last one. As you can see, View, Animation, Add Scene. So conceptually, what you could have done is, way back when, you could have done a lot of work in AutoCAD or scratched on a sheet of paper or in Paint and saved all those as JPEGs and images, brought them in, eventually been able to do, and this will not pick up on video, but I'm going to click from each typical scene here. You see how it's doing very quickly. You probably can't see that. Moves the camera around, and very quickly, especially if you do one additional thing, which is to change the scene or the style. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to here. And what you can finally do out here, once you have everything laid out in the very end, you go back out and you look at your styles. You perhaps change your style from something that's there. I'm going to go to competition style winners. I'll go to that one. That's an engineering style. Really doesn't make so much change here. And if you want to update them all, you then go to View, Animation. I'm sorry, I'm going to click this off. You're going to go right click, Scene Manager. This is looking a little bit different than what it used to be. Let's see, you want to grab them all. This is a different interface, and you just go ahead and update them all. You must go ahead and hit this update here, and when you do, you just update one thing or the other. Thanks for listening. We're running out of time.